Welcome to the Femcast. We're more than just a podcast, we are a movement, fueled by the voices, ideas and stories of women from all walks of life. We're here to amplify your voice, empower your ideas and ignite change. This is a platform where your story matters, whether it's celebrating success, overcoming adversity, or raising awareness on issues that shape our world. By subscribing, commenting, or reviewing, you help us grow our community so we can continue bringing these important conversations to the forefront. Connect with us across social media at the Femcast and be part of a growing community striving for equality. Join our mission. Share your story. This is the Femcast, where your voice leads the way. Welcome to today's episode of the Femcast. Today we're joined by Robert Kaiser, a true pioneer in personal safety and violence prevention. Robert has spent 3 decades in the trenches of domestic and international security, becoming a global authority dedicated to not just understanding the complexities of human violence, but how to reduce and prevent it. After founding PPSS Group in 2009 to tackle workplace violence head-on, Robert took his expertise further by working closely with hundreds of female survivors of physical and sexual crimes, using their lived experiences to shape meaningful trauma-informed safety strategies. This powerful collaboration led to his groundbreaking book, Never a Victim, a 530-page trauma-informed guide that's changing how women approach personal safety. While the ultimate responsibility lies with men to change their behaviour, Robert's work acknowledges that until that shift happens, women deserve clear evidence-based guidance on staying safe. The book is designed to empower women with practical knowledge, confidence and tools to navigate a world where violence and harassment remain daily realities. This episode is an important conversation about the fight for a world where no one has to live in fear. Let's get into it. This is the Femcast. Hi, Robert. You're very welcome to the Femcast podcast. It's lovely to have you on.
Good to see you, Anita. I'm looking forward to our conversation, our little chat here.
Yeah. So, Robert, can you tell our listeners and those watching us on YouTube who Robert Kaiser is?
Yes, cut that story very short. My name is Robert Kaiser. I'm 56 years old. I'm the founder and the CEO of a company called PPSS Group, which encompasses several companies specialized in protective equipment, reducing workplace violence-related injuries, saving lives, protecting frontline professionals. And on a secondary note, I have a passion for the last 30 years where I spent a lot of time educating myself in relation to violence against women and women's safety. I have interviewed and worked with literally hundreds of survivors of domestic abuse, sexual violence, physical violence. And ultimately, last year, I concluded a 2-year project writing a book, resulting in 530 pages and over 115,000 words called Never a Victim, which is, I believe, the most comprehensive guide and women's safety ever published.
Brilliant. And we'll get into talking about Never a Victim. And I suppose as a woman and looking through women's lens, we're back to where we say, why does the women need to fix the problem? Why can't we get the men to come on board? And I'm sure you've heard this, but I now see through your lens, until the men change and come on board with us, we need strategies. And that's where Never a Victim comes in. And I suppose your 30 plus years experience of working with Women's Aid as a consultant, supplying police forces and doing investigations throughout the world. So we'll just let you lead and you talk about your research, you're speaking to victims and all the work you've done to date.
Well, that's a lot of questions, a lot of answers to answer those questions. To get us started, yes, I concluded the book last year in November. The international edition will be released on Wednesday, the 12th of March. And it was quite interesting when I concluded the book, having written 115,000 words and trying my best in the most compassionate and most empowering ways for women to be safe I really came to realize, that how wrong this whole system is in a way. That that we are asking women to adapt all the time, to improve their safety, to watch out for certain things by avoiding certain environments, by being aware of certain things, by utilizing the intuition and etc. When it ultimately really is the man that need to change. Historic data is very, very clear that over 98%, 96, 97% of predators or perpetrators committing acts of physical sexual violence against women are men. So I think, I like to talk a lot about, I like to talk when I do podcasts, I like to talk about things where men actually come in and show accountability and, in terms of educating men, educating our children. So as comprehensive as the book is, I think the book was essential, I believe. It needed to be written. I do believe until we reach a society where violence against women has been significantly reduced or mitigated, until then, I do believe that it was good to write a book full of recommendations and empowering advice that help to avoid ever falling victim to it. But I think, the focus, I think, should be for future references for men to adapt and change the way they behave in certain fashion, certain meanings.
How do you think that's going to happen?
I don't know. It's educating. It's empowering women to make a stand. Well, I'm not. I think what happened last year, for example, in which Giselle Pellicot in France, I do believe that it will encourage women and it will empower more women to come forward and tell their stories. But I do believe it is men who need to learn to make it easier for women, in terms of men need to learn to listen carefully, to offer help unconditional, to pay attention, to empathize, not to be judgmental. And I know by all the conversations, through all the conversations I had with survivors of sexual violence, that is a massive, massive hurdle for the survivors, that they feel that they are being, what the word?
Judged.
Yeah, judged and categorized, and be labeled, and be as a victim, that no, she comes with baggage, I mean, and I think that needs to change. I think men need to look at female survivors as a good thing, as and not something that they see as a burden or as a weight,
Damaged.
Yeah, so this I think
That's what we would have thought of ourselves, or like from reading about women, like damaged goods. And do you think that holds women back from disclosing?
Absolutely, there's no question about it. I mean, I think there's several factors that hold women back. It could be the sense of shame incorrectly, the sense of shame. It could be, but yeah, it's the main thing. Now, I remember I was in a relationship many years ago, 2 decades ago, with a female survivor of rape. When she had drunk, her drink was spiked, and she was sexually assaulted, and it was a horrific story. And we had a lot of conversation about the subject. And then I reconnected with her 20 years later when I sort of concluded my book. I felt I was right to speak with her and see if I can get her permission or consent to mention her case a little bit in my book without being too precise, to make sure that she can be identified. And the most shocking part was really when I found out that even 20 years later, or way over 20 years later, that even her own young adult daughter and her best friend and her mother don't know about the incident. And I remember the conversation we had at the time, and how other people will look at her, and especially men, I believe. How will her father look at her? How will her brother look at her? How will her male colleagues look at her? How will her future partner look at her You know what I mean? And it's interesting that she clearly has a daughter and she has moved on, bless her soul, and that even her partner or her husband, I don't know if she's married or not, doesn't know the story, which is quite, and because I do feel, based on the conversation we had, that she was concerned or worried or anxious about being judged. And that is society we live in. I think women do believe that they will be labeled, they will be categorized, they will be judged by men. Now, I think most women, female survivors I've spoken to, make very clear that they don't have a major problem with talking to a female counselor or talking to a women's support organization over a coffee in a local cafe. I don't think that's a major issue really for them. But I think the concern many of them is how men see them. And that's us men. We need to look at that very carefully. How can that be the case? How can women prevent starting the healing process? How can women feel they can step out of the darkness, step into the light, start the healing process because of the concern how men or future partners may see them? And that is, I think, our obligation, our responsibility as men to say, well, don't worry about it. We're not going to look at you any different. No, we will listen to you equally like other women would. No, we will support you unconditionally. We will not judge you. We will not blame you for anything that has happened. We will empathize with you. We will pay attention. We will help you through the healing process. But I think we need to find a way of women actually believing in that as being the case. And that's just not where we are. Women question way too much, and rightly, I guess. Women question way too much if they come out of the darkness and turn into the light and tell their story. How will people respond? And that should be the last of the concern. I think, in my opinion, the only concern survivors of sexual violence should have is their own well-being, their own mental health, their own recovery. But like my ex-partner from over 20 years ago, the fact that she has got a daughter and is married now and just like her own husband or partner, whoever it is, doesn't know. What I mean is, so if he touches her in any way, in a very innocent way, and she overreacts or responds, he doesn't know why she reacts that way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is, how can you move on? Or I don't mean move on in a blasé way, but how can you heal? How can you recover? How can you vent? How can you unload if you don't share the information? I think the only way to reach happiness is again by talking about it. The class is that's relevant for no woman or man. Any person in law and who has been working in law enforcement, in military, and suffers from PTSD. The only way, in my opinion, is to heal, to start the healing process, is by venting, unloading, and talking about it. And too many women feel that they can't. And that is not their fault. That is the fault of society. No question about it. Sorry for rambling on.
You're not rambling at all. And it's good to hear a man talk like that. And, because for too long we've been fighting like we want to be heard, we want to be seen, we want to be believed. We don't want any judgment. We want to feel safe through the whole system, the legal system, reporting, and coming out the other side of it so we can heal. And we seem to be just met with walls all the time and having to have all this evidence. And I think that Giselle Pellico's case she was an incredible woman, number one, and bringing it out into the light, insisting on them being named, public court case. I'm sure you watched that with great interest and followed it every day.
Absolutely, 100%. I followed the case literally every single day, and I would comment on that in a second. But what you refer to as the wall, the wall woman experiencing, I call it systematic failures. I mean, you can call it a wall or systematic failure, it's probably the same thing. But the amount of people, individuals, organizations, how society is letting female survivors down, it's, in my opinion, absolutely free, incomprehensible. It really is. And that's just everybody. I mean, when you look at a mirror sometimes, it's us. I mean, why is it that women don't feel they can talk to me, for example. Now, what is it? What makes me not approachable? What makes, luckily, I am a person where women experience, in my base of experience, feel comfortable to share the information. So I'm quite fortunate, but other men don't. So what is it, that it makes them less approachable? Now, what is it with the police officer, with the police, that women don't feel they can comfort saying on, this is what happened to me. What is wrong with the police, in my opinion? And I'm not anti-police, I'm the other way around. I'm actually pro-law enforcement. I'm a strong supporter. Part of my business is around this entire law enforcement, supporting law enforcement officers. But from the sexual violence point of view, why do women feel they can't afford, go to the local police station, say, can I speak to you in private? I have a problem. The reason why they can't do it, because they don't feel they will be believed. They feel they will be judged, incorrectly judged. They doubt that the police will investigate thoroughly. There are so many things wrong. But then you think about medical stuff. How many domestic violence victims, and I call the word victims in this context, go to see a doctor for any other female-related issue, nothing to do related to violence, and the doctor will see some level of bruising at specific places of the body. At what point, does doctor actually question it beyond just saying, "Are you right?" And at what point does the doctor not accept the answer, I fell down the stairs 3 times? At what point is that not a plausible answer? At what point do you see a pattern developing? If a woman seeks medical attention at a local GP every 2, 3, 4 months with a broken arm, with bruises, a black eye, at what point do you realize, no, she's not falling down the steps all the time? So it's police is letting them down, doctors is letting them down, but then it's family too. Now, why is it that in the case of my ex-partner over 2 decades ago, why is it that she didn't feel comfortable enough to go to her own mother? And at that time, the woman I'm referring to was a young woman. She was in the early mid-20s. How can you not feel comfortable to speak to your mother about it? Now, what made your best friend so inapproachable that you couldn't share the information with your best friend? So when you call it the wall, I call it a systematic failure. I think women are being let down all over the world. And that is another reason why they can't start the healing process and start the recovery.
It is society, and it's been ingrained into us, shame, we feel guilt. Did we put ourselves in that position? And it's because
Absolutely.
media feeds into it as well. And, it's all that victim blaming.
Absolutely. In the book, I've made it very, very clear. And I think, it's not about my book, and it's not here to promote my book, but I made it very, very clear. All 530 pages, I said it many, many times in exactly clear black and white words. It's not your fault. It doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter the way you were dressed. It doesn't matter what you said. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how drunk you were. It doesn't matter what kind of drugs you have consumed. It doesn't matter. It's not your fault. But I think we need to really get it out into the open. We gotta stop this kind of victim blaming and looking at them as victims. And I think what happened last year in Paris, and you make a point a few minutes ago, I think it's the biggest, in my opinion, and I call myself, and I'm humble enough, I call myself literally a woman safety expert, having done it for 30 years and having written under 15,000 words. I think what happened last year was Gisèle Pelicot in France, in my opinion, is by a long shot the most powerful story and the biggest game changer in the world of violence against women or women's safety. I think there's a significant difference between what happened with Gisèle Pelicot last year and the Me Too movement. But I think that's a really important point. Based on data, statistics, and number, the Me Too movement was one of the biggest campaigns or movements in history, in living memory anyway, in regards to violence against women or women's safety. But the point of the matter I'm trying to make is, I don't think personally that it has brought any significant change. I don't believe it. But there's a reason for that. And the reason is the Me Too movement was purely based on a very simple concept that on Facebook, Instagram, or the social media, you use a hashtag called Me Too. That's what you type in. So what happened then is that women, literally millions, not even 100,000, millions of women came forward and said, Me Too. But nobody knows that afterwards, when family members or friends question it, oh, I saw your post, you hashtag Me Too, what happened to you? That very, very often the answer was, I don't want to talk about it. So yes, individuals knew that something has happened, that she's a survivor of something that we can't define because she hasn't explained the total story. She felt with the Me Too movement, empower women to come forward saying, yes, it happened to me too. But only a fraction of those individuals also took the next step saying, I give you all the details, I'm sharing my story in order to empower other women. Are you with me?
Yes.
What happened to Giselle Picot is completely different kettle of fish. Because it wasn't about a hashtag. It's her saying, shame must change side. And it was her taking physical action, not a hashtag. She took physical action to waive the right of anonymity. So her husband at the time had to be named and shamed, and she shifted shame from the victim to the perpetrator. And that has changed a lot because now more and more women come forward and actually tell their story. This is no longer about hashtag Me Too or what happened to you or I can't talk about it. Because the Me Too movement, the hashtag, didn't mean that they also felt comfortable that the police will investigate it. The Me Too hashtag didn't mean that she felt her friends or her parents or her partner would listen, empathize, and support help. It didn't mean anything. It just meant that she declared it happened to me too. But it did say that she was willing to share information. But Giselle Picot single-handedly, I believe, has empowered thousands and 10,000, potentially 100,000 women to actually say, well, it's not a hashtag saying, okay, happened to me too. I'm also giving you the details for the purpose of two things: to shift the blame on the perpetrator, to name and shame them, but more importantly, to empower other women to say, I can do it too. The amount of social media and the digital world, the amount of women are now releasing their personal story via a blog, via an article, via a podcast, via whatever kind of platform, has changed completely because Giselle Picot has empowered them to do it. The Me Too movement has created a number of individuals saying it happened to me too, or who are not willing to share this story. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. It's all about action.
Absolutely.
And we spoke about this before when we had a conversation. It's you said to me, theory is one thing, it has to be action. And I wholeheartedly agree. And I talk about another lady I work with, and myself and Lynn talk about action, action. We're sick of talking about it. We're sick of campaigns. It has to be actioned.
Absolutely. But it's an interesting story, actually. And I need to be careful what I'm saying, but I'll tell you this anyway. So I was invited to speak at the UK Crowd Management Association. And when I released the book, the chair of that organization, Anne-Marie Chibib, was what a kind, lovely woman and a great professional. She was kind enough to be a beta reader of my book, and she provided me with a lovely, great review. And she also asked me if I'll be able to speak at the UK Crowd Management Annual Conference. It actually turned to a panel discussion. Now I'm actually a panel member rather than a solo speaker. So I actually sent Anne-Marie Chibib actually an email this lunchtime. And I said, I don't know if I'm the right person to join the panel discussion. Because I'm always very, very true to who I am. And I will always say what I have to say, often unfiltered, but I'm a guy who takes action. I don't really love on so much. So what I sent my email to her, which was a very personal email, I don't want to repeat the entire content, saying, I don't want to say anything at the conference because that is wrong, because I don't want to disrespect you, Anne-Marie, and I don't want to disrespect the organization. But ultimately, I've participated in countless of conferences or public events where dozens of people discussing things, analyzing things, having a chat. But to be really honest, not a lot of things change. The example I can give is before I jumped on the podcast with you, I actually Googled, because the conference at the UK Court Management Association, it's about creating safe spaces. So I typed in creating public safe spaces for women into Google. The first one I found was United Nations Women, which is great. And the title was Creating Safe Public Spaces for Women. Then I scrolled down to Google for over 10 pages. I went to position 100. And position 100 is an article by local government in New South Wales, Australia. Guess what it's called? Designing safe public spaces for women. And then I actually scrolled down. I went to page 100 of Google. Each page has got 10 selections. So I went to page 100. That's position 1000. And in position 1000 is another article about another discussion and another survey, another study. And guess what? About creating safe spaces for women. The oldest I found, a major research project, was in 2011. So what I'm saying is, there are thousands of reports over the last 13 years about how we create safe spaces. If I would ask a woman in the UK now, in Manchester, in London, in Bradford, in Birmingham, in Glasgow, Sheffield, tell me where in your city do you feel really safe? There will be radio silence for a long time. There will be no answer. And then they may say, or my parents' house, or my best friend's apartment. That may be the secondary answer, or they may call it Starbucks or cafe, whatever local cafe. What I'm saying is, I have looked at today 100 different surveys, studies, reports, conferences, analysis, and white papers and discussion forums. And guess what? Still, there is no safe space for a woman in any major city I'm aware of. And that proves the point I'm making. 10, 15 years later, after all these blogs and articles, white papers, women are still not safe. So what we have to realize is it doesn't take another conference. It doesn't take another research project. It doesn't take another study.
Thank you for tuning in to the Femcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and become part of our growing community. By subscribing, you're helping us bring important stories to the forefront and giving us the opportunity to book incredible guests who share their powerful insights. Your support means everything to us. It helps us continue the research, amplifying these vital voices and delivering the best content possible. Feeling generous? You can even buy me a coffee to fuel the work we're doing here. Together, we can keep this movement alive and thriving. So let's keep the conversation going, amplify these voices, and make a difference. We're in this with you. This is the Femcast.
So just on that, Robert, we know governments can move when they need to. And like you say, we don't need more funding to do research. We don't need another university doing research on it. We know about the safe spaces for women.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's a valid point. And you talked about the group of people that were meeting for a concert and the terrorist that blew himself up and caused havoc. And then everybody, it was chaos, emergency. They responded really quickly.
Yeah.
If we took all those women, because there's an unwillingness there to help women and children in homes that are experiencing domestic abuse, what will it take that we hire out a big arena and we put all those women and children into that arena and we say, there you are, there's thousands of women and this is happening to them every single night of the week. What are you going to do about it? Do we need to get a terrorist in here? Because they're already living with terrorism in their home, psychologically, physically. Their children are grown up, they're so damaged, their brains are damaged. What do we need to do? Do we need to get all these women and children in one huge arena and say, now, will you do something? Or is it because it's one man per home? And I'm saying men because you said earlier on, it is over 90% male perpetrators. Do we need then every man? I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know what to do.
To answer your question, I can't say what it takes infrastructure-wise or planning-wise to get every woman, who is currently suffering domestic abuse or domestic violence into some type of stadium or hall to get a graphic or to get a visual impression of how many women are suffering. Without any question, a very, very powerful, it's called almost a media stunt. I don't mean in a disrespectful way, but it would be very, very impactful. So I think if you want to create a message, a hard-hitting message, then that will be very, 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 very a good idea. I don't think realistically that is possible, because I don't think every woman who is in an abusive relationship or suffering domestic violence would be permitted by her partner potentially to go to the location or leave the home in the first place. But to answer your question in the first place is, so you make a very valid point, from the number game, that's how governments will see it, they have to see it. It's a number game. If they believe there's a major risk of terrorism, then they will have a formula in place. How many individuals do they believe are at immediate risk? How severe is the threat? So how realistic is the threat, the probability of the threat, and the potentially impact or the outcome or the consequence of the threat being executed. And that will have a figure of X, Y, Z. So you're right. If you then compare the numbers of women currently being abused in their home or being violated in their home, and there's a question about that number will by far exceed the number of individuals ever being hurt or killed by terrorists, on British soil, for example. So there's a real case to argue that domestic violence or domestic abuse should be taken way more serious, potentially as serious as terrorism, based on the numbers of individual suffering. And is it possible to have the government the power to do it? Well, the answer absolutely is yes, because COVID has proven the point, I guess. I mean, when the government failed, not we as human beings, and it doesn't matter if we are on the pro side or the con side of vaccination. There are very divided opinions, divided camp, and we don't have to go into that kind of conversation. But the government has proven that if the government feels and deems a risk or a problem to be so severe that it literally overrules every existing rule, regulation, or directive, and they will put the thumb down and say that has to be done, even against the will of the public potentially. So it's literally the government coming to conclusion that domestic abuse or domestic violence is just as severe or even more severe in terms of numbers for sure than even terrorism is. And numbers-wise it is. There's no question about that. I don't know how many people have been hurt or killed by terrorists. I'm sure there are many, and I'm not disrespecting any of them, but how many women have been killed or daily suffering physical violence or violation, that number will exceed terrorism by far.
Absolutely. And if you take the children into it as well.
Absolutely. And the long-term
So like 50% are women in relationships, and it's 1 in 3, and they're the ones that report.
Yes.
So, and because children weren't recognized in domestic violence, if you take that into account as well, like totally.
And if you talk about the number, if you want to do it really, if you're going to further to math, obviously it's getting more complex by the second here, but if you then would also take into consideration the emotional impact domestic abuse, domestic violence is having on the children, especially on the boys, in terms of the chance or the risk of them also becoming abusers or perpetrators, because that's all they have witnessed. When statistics have proven over and over again, young boys who are exposed to abuse or violence, either in a domestic setting, i.e. being in a domestic abusive in a family home, or being exposed to violence, i.e. in conflict zones, in war zones, for example, are much more likely to be abusive or using violence themselves in due course. So the number of female survivors of domestic abuse and violence, you need to know at the number of young children who in the future will be added to the numbers. And I think a lot of boys, a lot of men we know who are violent toward the partner now have either witnessed abuse or they have been abused sexually or physically themselves by a member of family when they were young, one or the other.
Mhm.
That's a very high number.
And then, like, if they look into the future, you have
Yeah.
got young men being incarcerated.
Yeah.
You've got the cost of putting them in prison, rehabilitation, the court system, the legal system, what they're playing, the policemen to respond, judges. And then you have the young women that are saying, well, this is kind of happened at home, and their brains are so damaged that they're going into that those relationships. There's no education there. If they're not like future planning or future proofing it either, where they're looking and going, well, that's going to cost us X amount. We need to get in here now and cut the cord. Put this.
I think the government is partly, and I'm saying only, but partly pressured by the media. Terrorism, there's a question about if you like it or not. Terrorism sells news. There's no question about it. You have got a man running around with a machete on a marketplace, and as bad as it is, and I'll try to go into too graphic details, but if you've got a man running around the city center with a machete and start stabbing people, that will be on the front page of every news, never mind local news, national news. It will make the front page. If a woman is brutally sexually assaulted or badly physically assaulted at home, that won't even make the newspaper. So that pressure of negative news, that is a contributing factor why the government will prioritize how they prioritize now. If it's not terrorism, if it's whatever it is, you know what I mean? But the bigger the public outcry, now the more the media will cover it. The more the media covers it, the more the government will act on it. And I think domestic violence, domestic abuse is still kept a little bit too quiet. It becomes individuals who have suffered or are currently suffering domestic abuse or violence become more vocal because we all, including me, but through the book and society, we try to empower more to come forward. And the more the comfort, the more vocal there will be. The more vocal there will be, the more the media will cover it. The more the media will cover it, the more attention the government is going to pay. That's what I believe. But the government is very much at the mercy of the media, a lot.
Mm. Well, I don't know how it works anywhere else, but here the media are very quiet and they toe the line because then they all get government jobs later
All right, okay.
to be their PR machines. So that's how I feel about it here.
Yeah.
And there's a reluctance with the media as well to cover it and to name it. And it's always victim blaming.
Absolutely, but as you said a couple of times now, I do genuinely, and I mean it, I do believe things are changing to the better. I wholeheartedly believe it. I'm not saying we are close to end violence against women because that would be unrealistic. And that's not going to happen for a long time. That's not me being glass half empty. It's just reality. Too many things or too much has to happen to see an end of violence against women. But I do believe we're heading towards reducing the numbers or mitigating this risk moving forward. And I do believe, without going on about it, that last year's case in France, Giselle Pellicot, and similar cases in the future, and I would believe there will be others, will have significantly contributed to women coming forward. And I really believe it is about empowering women and giving them a voice, a platform. I think that is the solution to the problem. And you can see the media changing its behavior or the way it's reporting. Before Giselle Pellicot, you're right, there was a lot, even up to the point, or before Epstein, on Harvey Weinstein, on all these kind of high-profile cases, up to the point was a lot about victim blaming. But I do believe that these high-profile cases like Epstein and Weinstein and P. Diddy or whatever his call, Sean Combs, whatever his name is, and there are so many high-profile cases where the media actually now starting to support the survivors. No? And the media are giving now those survivors a platform to tell their story. And that will empower more and more women to come forward. And I do believe the more women come forward, the more pressure will be on government to make further changes. So I do believe there's a little bit of light at the horizon.
I find it, and I'm sure, like, in all the women I talk to and work with, it's exhausting that you need hundreds of statements. Like Weinstein, it was an open secret, and the careers were destroyed, smear campaigns start, and then it takes hundreds, and it takes so much evidence, and nobody. It takes hundreds before one is believed. That has to change. That has to stop. Why can't one be believed? Why does it take hundreds to come forward? It's the same
I
with
agree.
P. Diddy, Epstein.
100% agree. But for me, that was quite a major part of my book. It's about, and this is not disrespecting you what you just said, but there's a difference between wishful thinking and the reality. We keep it really separate. When I wrote my book, there's nothing about wishful thinking. It's just about harsh reality. And sometimes the book is extremely clinical in its tone and in its vocabulary. The fact of the matter is there are legal systems around the world, and there's a legal system, a legal framework in the United States. So you're 100% right. From the wishful thinking point of view, I don't mean in a disrespectful way, from the Polish mindset point of view, it would be great if one woman said I got sexually assaulted and we feel like Weinstein or Epstein or Sean Combs or Puff Diddy, whatever his name is, would get sent down for the rest of their life. That is a dream case scenario. Regrettably, sadly, or rightly, there is a legal framework in place. And if you've got 3, 4, 5 lawyers, each ending up with hundreds of thousands of dollars a day to get you out of prison, but you have to accept the fact that these lawyers will exploit every single weakness in every single victim's statement or victim's account. It's just a fact. It's not about right or wrong. I can say in my book, it's not about right or wrong. It's just a physical fact. The US law allows a defense attorney to cross-examine witnesses and victims and whatever. So ultimately, yes, it would be great if one woman said that happened and that would be the end of the story. But the point is that because of the legal procedures and the law and the rights defendants have to make the legal case bulletproof and to significantly increase the chances of those men being taken in custody and staying there, preferably for the rest of their lives, then I would say the number of statements, the strength of the statements, and the credibility of statements is of profound importance. So I rather have 100 statements and 50 are not making it. Yeah, even if all 100 are rightful statements made by genuine female survivors of sexual assault, even if 50 fall through the net and the defense attorney dismantle it and said, no, it's not going to be worth it, the judge is throwing it out, it ultimately, the objective is that those people are taken off, being taken off the street. And I call it, the more dice you throw, the higher the chance of sex. I've got 100 statements, and only 3 make it at the end, as long as the objective is being met, that man is not going to see freedom ever again. So I do think a number of statements is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It shouldn't need it. I get it. But as long as we live in a country, the same UK or Ireland, where prosecutors and defense attorneys have got a certain right, I think it's in everyone's interest to strengthen the legal case of those survivors.
Yeah. And back to the Giselle Pellicot case, I learned that in France, which is absolutely outrageous and staggering, that they use the defense of, well, she didn't fight back. That is scary.
Yeah, and again, that it's unfortunately the reality we live in, and it doesn't make it right at all. But around the world, certainly in developed countries, it's a very, very divided camp. You've got half of the countries define rape by the word consent, which clearly is, without any doubt, the best way and the right way of doing it. So the moment a woman isn't given her consent, then that is classed as rape. That's really important to point out what consent actually means. For example, you cannot give consent, i.e., if you are drunk, if you're intoxicated, and that means it could be prescription drugs or it could be class A drugs, it doesn't matter. If you're mentally ill, if you're underage, or if the person committing the sexual act or forcing you is a person of authority or a person of power. That could be a teacher with a student. It could be an owner of a company or a manager towards an employee, for example, because there's an imbalance of power. So any of that is technically rape because legally these individuals could have not given consent. But even if they are overage, they're not intoxicated or whatever, even during the act of sex, whatever you want to call it, sexual intercourse, you would say no or change your mind. That's immediately you're withdrawing consent, and the person will have to stop immediately. But sadly, that's only the fact in certain countries, in many countries of the developed world. The other camp, the other half type of thing, have got a different definition of rape, and that is the use of force. Has force being used, or has the survivor fought back? And that is a problem, because that's a major problem in the context of drink spiking. In several countries of the Western world, developed countries, if a woman's drink would be spiked and a man would sexually assault her or rape her, in our definition of rape, then he may well get away with that, because in that country, he has not used physical force, and she can't prove that she has fought back. The fact that she physically couldn't is actually irrelevant in that country. If she hasn't fought back, that means he has not committed rape. And there are usually very, very old laws. Some of these laws are literally over 100 years old. So I think more and more countries will in the future. That's what I think we will see further change. Like I'm saying, I can see light at the end of the tunnel. I can see a little bit of light everywhere, and I really can. Because again, the more women come forward, the more changes government will make, and the more action they will take. And France is one of these examples. France was a country that had a law that defined rape. If a woman has fought back, it's rape. If she has not fought back, it's not rape. But they are changing the law. And I think a lot of countries in the West and in the developed countries will change laws in the future to make a rape based on the word consent. And that will change the rights of women and the investigation on the prosecution of those countries significantly. And those numbers of sexual assault and acts of violence and rape will go through the roof because the law has changed, will change. You follow me?
Yes, absolutely. You're confident, Robert, then that it is changing and you can see it. You can see it with men and with how the legal system is changing.
I can see changes. I can refer to it as seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, but I can see it. It may not be as fast as a lot of supporters and women's support organizations would like to see the changes. We are at the mercy of the fact it's a democracy. Now, there are laws have to be written, and people have got the right to vote, and there's so many reasons why things take long. But beside that, I think the way individuals are taking action, women speaking up, the media reporting differently, more men actually starting to support that case of ending violence against women, more men becoming vocal about it. 10 years ago, hardly any man would have talked about ending violence against women, or hardly any man would have spoken openly about sexual assault or rape or violence against women. All these things tell me things are changing to the better. How quick and what the end result of that is, I have got no idea,
Mm. And you feel that they are talking more openly from, say, your 30 years experience working in security and women's safety.
Oh, absolutely.
It's changing.
Yeah. There's no question about it. I think, even look last year saw a change in the sexual harassment law, for example. That means a lot of security companies, or any companies really, They have to look at how sexual harassment is being dealt with at your work environment. That's quite a bit of a change. And that, again, will empower more women to come forward, tell their stories about the harassment they may well be suffering even at work, So I think there are little changes. So I think it's the number of changes makes me feel quite optimistic about the near future.
Thank you for tuning in to the Femcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and become part of our growing community. By subscribing, you're helping us bring important stories to the forefront and giving us the opportunity to book incredible guests who share their powerful insights. Your support means everything to us. It helps us continue the research, amplifying these vital voices and delivering the best content possible. Feeling generous? You can even buy me a coffee to fuel the work we're doing here. Together, we can keep this movement alive and thriving. So let's keep the conversation going, amplify these voices, and make a difference. We're in this with you. This is the Femcast. Robert, myself and yourself spoke earlier about the conferences, and we don't need another conference and we don't need security. And you're saying there is light, there is action. What kind of action are you looking at or seeing changes in?
I would like to see more changes in terms of how we educate men in identifying distressed women, And that's based on my background. I think the security industry, the safety industry is a really good place to make a start. And the example I use a lot when I do other podcasts or when I wrote my book, well, imagine at a major event in a festival, a concert, or a nightclub, it doesn't matter what it is. And you're a safety or security professional, you're being charged with the safety and security of the individuals in the premises, on the ground, or at that event. And you see a woman being seriously intoxicated, whatever that means. Basically, a female who literally can hardly communicate. You might be throwing up, she might be literally, but whatever's going on. And you see a man right next to who's absolutely sober. I call it like a decision T-junction. You turn left or turn right. It's like you either turn left, which is like a positive mindset. You think, okay, hey, he might be a loving husband and he just pulled the short straw type of thing, and he's a designated driver of the night. That's an option. Or you could think positively and think, well, he doesn't drink alcohol, and that's why he's totally sober, whatever the reasons are. Or you can turn right, which is having a negative mindset. And I have that. I'm a very positive person in my outlook in life, and every single day, and the glass always half full. But in the security industry, I always had a negative mindset. So if I would see a woman extremely intoxicated and a man sober, I would think, well, first of all, I would question, did I see them arriving together? Clearly, if I can recall them arriving together, coming out of the same taxi or getting out of the same car, I would take probably for granted that they are partner, they're in a relationship, or they're married. That's information, that's a piece of intelligence that will lead you to a certain conclusion. But if I see in a woman who's extremely intoxicated, a man is totally sober, and I cannot recall them arriving together, I would certainly consider a little bit more sinister options. I would consider, well, maybe that guy actually arrived at this festival, event, party, nightclub, or whatever, spiked her drink with the intention of taking her away to a place that he already has well prepared hours or days before, highly likely very isolated and soundproof, and potentially she might actually be taking her last breath that night. That's how I would see it. And the only way to make me feel better, because I actually care about women's safety, that's the question we keep saying early on. It really depends how much you really care. Now, I really, really care about women's safety. Otherwise, I would have not spent 3,500 hours researching and writing and now 530 pages about it. So I can genuinely claim I really, really care about it. Anybody knows me knows that. So I would have with my colleague, I would take her to the left, I would take him to the right, and then I was asking the question, can you just answer 3 questions? What's her name? Where does she live? What's the job title? Things like that. As an experienced safety security professional, you also have got your intuition. If he goes to the answer, she's got Susan Smith, she's a man, she's a graphic designer, and he smiles at you and he's cooperative, then every signal will tell you that's probably truthful. You can see if someone is making it up, if he's truthful, if he's transparent, if he's helpful, if he's cooperative, if he tries to prevent identification, if he doesn't want to show you his ID. They're all alarm signs. But if he is act suspicious, and I would certainly ask my member of the team to go to the female and say, "Can you give me your name? What's your name?" And if her answers don't cross-reference or don't match his answers, well, I would certainly not allow that woman to leave the premises. And again, if I really care, I would make sure, never mind being a man, being a security professional, that she will immediately be taken to safety. It could be an office, it could be in a room where she'd be guarded by security professionals until law enforcement, police, or whatever will arrive. If he wants to run away and I can detain him, that's not my priority. My priority will be her well-being, her safety, because my objective will be potentially to save a life that night. Now, if she is not cooperative, hypothetically, because she's so intoxicated and he is getting a bit more erotic and getting a bit more hostile, but still claiming he is her husband, or still claiming and telling you whatever kind of story, but doesn't want to give you physical evidence, he doesn't want to show his passport, he doesn't allow you to look at the handbag, well, then my last choice would be to call paramedics. I can easily say, hang on, I am genuinely concerned about her health and well-being. So please allow me to call paramedics now to ensure that she actually is good to go. And paramedics will make sure that actually they will give you a good going over, like, are you okay? They will take, check her blood, they will check your blood pressure and heart rate, whatever, but they will also ask you for ID. And you can change the man's behavior. You can identify now, because if he is really her loving husband, well, clearly he will care, won't he? He will come over, probably hold her hand. He will hold her head. He probably will caress her. He will probably, in a very soothing voice, will make her that she is listening. Are you with him? But if he actually has bought a drink, well, he will try to avoid identification. He will try to avoid arrest, and he will try to get away with that. But by us not questioning it, that is what Kira keeps saying in terms of the Manchester Arena bombing. That security guard saw something, his intuition told him something is right, but ultimately he overruled his intuition because he was concerned about his own agenda, right or wrong. And I've always said to when I was operating security, to my team members, if you see something, engage and deal with that. Share the intelligence immediately. Any findings, share the intelligence. So you have to act as a team, but always act. Don't just see something, believe something is wrong, and ignore it. That ignorance may well cost the life of an innocent human being that very same day.
How realistic is it, though, that security guards are working like that, personnel are working like that?
Unrealistic. It's unrealistic because most security guards are simple. They are underqualified, are not good enough for the job, and they shouldn't get a license in the first place. I genuinely believe it. I'm very, very critical towards security professionals in this country. When some security professionals, you just wonder how did you get the job? I'm very critical, but the fact of the matter is what I say is true. If the security professionals would undergo a greater level of training, they actually have to physically qualify to get the job done, et cetera, then you would significantly increase the chance that these security professionals will be intellectually, mentally, maturity-wise capable of doing exactly what I just said. But it's also a number game. If you deal with 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 people, you've got a handful of security guards. No, that again is unrealistic. But again, then it's a security company's fault just having deployed 5, 6, 7 security professionals, or is the government's fault to allow the security professionals to understaff that venue. You know what I mean? But the fact of the matter, it doesn't change anything on the fact what I say. If you see something going wrong, do you engage with it? Do you ignore it? And that's not just security guys. That's men in general. Look, if I would go to town this afternoon, that's to my weekly shopping with my wife. Perfect example. If I would go this afternoon with my wife into town, do my weekly shopping, and I see a woman that I deem looks in distress. It doesn't matter what signal it is. It doesn't matter what signal I'm getting. It could be a body language. It could be a facial expression. But if my intuition tells me, I don't think this woman is well, I've got two options, don't I? I can either ignore and get on with my weekly shopping because guess what? I want to go home and eat. I'm starving. Or I take the minute of my schedule and say, excuse me, Madam, please don't mean no disrespect, but can I ask you, are you okay? And either her answer will satisfy me or it won't. If she says to me, F off, okay, fair enough, then that I have to I deal with it how I see fit, you know what I mean? But I do believe the amount of women I've dealt with over the last 20, 25 years who told me something that absolutely had a profound impact. And that was a major reason for me doing what I'm doing and for me writing the book. And what many women have told me, many women, I'm not saying the majority, but many women, is that when they suffered sexual abuse or sexual violence or following drink spiking or anything, that somewhere between the entire process, not just drink spiking, any sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual harassment, that during the entire process, someone had a chance to intervene.
Wow.
It could be a family member, it could be a bystander, it could be a work colleague, it could be a person of authority, it could be anybody, it could be a police officer, it could be a doctor. But as we said earlier on, how many doctors have let domestic violence victims down, service down, but ignoring what they saw? It's like what I said about security guard. If you see a woman coming to a GP practice every week, every fortnight, with a broken finger or bruising, and if you really believe her story that she fell over again, and again, there's something significantly wrong with you. So do you act on your intuition, your suspicion, or not? And it's the same with us men. If I see a woman, even in public, in distress, I will always engage. And either she makes me feel like, no, I'm all right, or I feel she's not all right. And if she's not all right, then I will preferably, in the presence of my wife, to even have a witness, to engage with her, make sure that she's safe.
Just on intuition, which I want to go to in your book, because that was the big take I got from it. We had the Manchester bombing and we had the Pellico case that we discussed in this podcast. One didn't go with his intuition. One did. The security guard, when he saw Pellico upskirting, said, today I'm not going to mind my own business. Two of them were security guards, and he went and he brought it further. And it was during the investigation that they found the most horrendous case in, I'd say, the history of domestic violence and sexual violence, what he committed. And it was that security guard that went with his intuition. And then it just opened up the Pandora's box. And we had the Pellico case, which is just brilliant. Well, it's not brilliant, but you know what I mean? As in, we had a person who took action. There was a follow through on it. And then there was the case. And then one woman up against 50 men in court every day and using her voice and actions. I suppose we'll go to the book now and intuition. And
so,
can we talk about the intuition and why it's so important to go with your intuition?
Right, let's talk about intuition. So when I finished writing the book, I gave it to a total of 16 beta readers, including the international edition, literally all over the world, from Australia, obviously the UK and America. And I would literally say that every single person actually commented on the chapter intuition the most, which was quite interesting for me, because for me, it's like common sense almost. It's like, this is pretty much like the basics. But it's quite interesting that so many female beta readers actually felt to comment on that. The intuition is something that we all have. We all have good, what we call gut feeling or instinct, whatever you call it. We all have this feeling sometimes where the hair in our neck stands up and feel uncomfortable, or stomach starts cramping up, and something tells us, we don't know what it is, but something tells us something ain't right here. We can't pinpoint it. This is not something we are born with, like people sometimes say. It's not something you can learn per se either. It's just actually something to do with your subconscious, and it's an algorithm of everything you've experienced in your life. It's the experience you have made, knowledge you have gained, things you have seen, things you have heard, and it's an algorithm of many, many things. So ultimately, when you feel distress, or when you face a risk, or when you face a threat, your subconscious recalls everything you have experienced or read and seen and heard or whatever, and makes you feel a certain way. The good thing with intuition, and this is really important, that was the most important message I think probably in my mind, that even intuition sometimes can be wrong. That's completely irrelevant though. Intuition will never get you into trouble. Intuition will never make you do something or make you want to do something that actually will increase your risk, expose you further to threat, or makes you more vulnerable. Never. It's absolutely psychologically possible. Your intuition will always prioritize your well-being, your safety, and will always want to get you out of that. So it's really important to believe that our intuition is something that is worthwhile listening to, we should listen to, and we certainly should act on it. The problem with that is, in today's society, that women in general, or a lot of women, don't do it. And that's not because I'm attacking women, because it's the last thing. I wouldn't write a book about the subject if I would disrespect women. It's because society has made women behave that way. Not to talk back, to comply, not to cause a scene, not to cause a scene, not to embarrass a man, not to be rude, not to be disrespectful, etc., etc. And there are so many cases I've studied now where this became quite paramount. So there's a case, actually, I've got a book in front of me of a lady called Deborah Ann Davis, who actually wrote a poem called Betrayed by the Angels. And I mentioned it in my book, which really it's a quite short poem, but it's basically, she was in an apartment and someone knocked on her door, and she opened the door and she saw that man, and her intuition, her good feeling, her instinct immediately said, something isn't right, I don't like him. And her intuition suggested strongly, close the door. That's what she said. It told me to disengage, but I didn't, because I didn't want to be rude, because we shouldn't be rude. It was minutes later when she was sexually assaulted. But she said she knew before that something was wrong. And there are so many stories, and I come up with stories sometimes with when you're facing a lift, or you entering an apartment complex, and I don't know, and the lift comes down, and you're waiting, and you can't wait to see your friends or family, or have your lunch or your dinner or whatever it is. At the end, the lift door opens, and you see that man in the lift. And for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter what it is. If something tells you, and you don't know what it is, it's a subconscious, you can't explain that. So don't look for an explanation. Women say, oh, I tried to give myself an answer to the question, but I didn't know what. No, don't worry about the answer. If your instinct tells you, and it will be instantly, within a split second, your instinct, your good feeling will tell you, I don't like this guy. It could be because he's smiling, because he doesn't seek eye contact, or the way he looks at you, or it doesn't his physique, his body posture, his smell. It doesn't matter what he's wearing. So what do you do? And the fact of the matter, regrettably, is that the vast majority of humans actually would enter that lift because they don't want to embarrass him. They don't want to be perceived as rude. They want to be brave. They don't want to be dominated by an idiot looking grumpy or being manipulated by a guy who's whatever. And they do it. And they rather go into a soundproof steel box than waiting 30 seconds for the next lift to arrive and be safe. It's something, And that's what I'm saying. Your intuition tells you, wait, the intuition doesn't tell you run away. Intuition just says, don't get into the lift, take the next one. That's what the intuition is telling you. It's not overreact, go crazy, call the police. No, just don't go to the lift, wait 30 seconds, go next one. What the majority want, they will enter the lift.
Mm. And it
And
is, I saw that before as well. We are the only creatures that will do the politeness, like an animal will spot danger and run.
Absolutely. They're relying on it. In fact, they're relying on it. Now, any gazelle, any kind of whatever wildebeest, whatever you call it, any of these kind of animals, if they can sense a tiger, a lion, or any of that, they will run. They depend on it. They will know that. I think they're not gonna sit there, stand there. I think I can try a lion. But let's wait. Let's wait for confirmation. Let's wait to see the lion. Why it's too late? They will immediately run and deal with it and take action. They're not gonna think about it much longer. Should I run or should I not run? They just take action. And I think we got. If in my book I've tried to empower more women, listen to your intuition. And there's a story in my book, which again, it's a really good story to hit my point home. And it's a story of a woman with a boy. She had a boy, and he had to go to a hospital to literally do a very minor surgery, no drama. There was no life-saving or life at risk, whatever. That's a minor surgery. So she arrived at the hospital. That's a true story, by the way. And actually, in the book, I actually quote the name of the hospital and her real name. So it's not a made-up story. It's a real case. So that woman arrives at the hospital with her boy for a normal surgery, standard procedure. And then the surgeon arrived. And her instinct, her intuition, her gut feeling immediately says, oh, I don't like the surgeon. Because he was rude, he appeared to be rude, and he tried to appear, he appeared in a way that she just didn't like him. And she continued communicated with him. And every single sentence, her intuition reminded her, like, oh, I don't like this guy. Something is not right about this guy. She chose to override her intuition, and she chose to ignore her intuition. That minor surgery actually resulted in the death of her own son. An hour later, that son actually died. Her son died during that surgery. Interesting part, though, is the aftermath. And the aftermath was that the police started the investigation, that they interviewed all the medical personnel that were related to that surgery or working in the department. And it was absolutely nuts to hear some of these statements. Because one nurse said, when he arrived at work, I don't think he was in a great mood, was he? Along those lines. Now, another doctor who was part of it said, that's okay. Oh, when he came to work, I thought, is he drunk or is something was right with him? And everybody, literally everybody, had a bad feeling about him that day. That blew my mind. So you have a mother whose job is to look after her son's life. Her intuition says something isn't right, and she overrode her intuition. All the medical staff who involved in a surgery have an opinion afterwards saying, something didn't feel right. Everybody overrode the intuition. Everybody ignored intuition. And a young boy lost his life that day. That's physical fact. That's a true story. I've always said, to my friends, my wife, if your intuition tells you something, do it. Just don't do it. Whatever it is, whatever the consequence, can be late to appointments, late to meetings. There's nothing you can't do the next day type of thing. You know what I mean? But take action, but listen to your intuition. Don't override it because society tells you to. Don't be kind. Don't be respectful. Don't be sweet or innocent. Or yes, cause a scene. Stand up and make a stand. Cause a scene. Embarrass a person. But don't be quiet and ignore your intuition.
Well, thank you for those words, Robert, because, as women and young girls, we're taught be polite, don't make a scene. What we spoke about before, don't embarrass yourself, don't embarrass them, or you're embarrassing. And you come out and say the complete opposite and go, yes, make a scene. Yes,
Absolutely.
call it out. Yes, scream. Like when we sense danger, scream and cause a scene.
Even at a workplace, and people have different opinions what I say, and that's fine. But if I would be a woman and I would be sitting at my desk, whatever I'm going to do in whatever work environment, and a man makes a seriously inappropriate sexual joke, or there's some type of sexual harassment, you've got two options. You can be courteous, that is fine. I don't have a problem with that. Saying, hey, Pete, no, Thomas, can you do me a favor? Can you just come outside and can I have a private word with you? And so you can say, Thomas, I really don't like the way you talk. It's really whatever. That's the option. I don't have a problem with that. I would be very different. I literally would stand up in the middle of the office and says, Thomas, stop talking like this. You're very, very offensive. Nobody in the office thinks it's funny. Now, it's really poor behavior. Do not do that again. Guess what? This guy is gonna now bite his tongue next time. He's gonna stop this because you embarrass him. But most people give the advice, have a private word with him because it's courteous. Couldn't give a damn about courtesy. No, the only way to stamp out behavior like this, if actually women make a stand, less courtesy, less kindness sometimes, less that man who behaves like this doesn't deserve the courtesy. If I've got a problem with someone's behavior, I don't mind being saying, can you come outside and have a and be courteous and have a private conversation? That's fine. If he's not a bad person, if he's a nice person having a bad day, that's fine. But if someone displays like masculinity, extremism at work, for example, well, I wouldn't have a quiet word with the person. I would really make a stand and embarrass him in front of everyone, and he would soon stop. I promise you that.
We need to teach young girls coming up, use your voice, and boys, use your voice. Use it. Don't be
Absolutely.
afraid to use it.
This is where the power parenting or parenthood comes in. I think we all have got a responsibility, as parents. I think we need to teach with our children, in this case, our daughters, on the idea of speaking to them at 16 years old is absolutely nonsense. I think we have to accept the fact that we're living in a society where it's no longer inappropriate to have this conversation when they're 13 or 14 years old. I mean, literally, it's absolutely fine. When they're so developed now, they're so fast moving in the development. To the age of 13, 14, it's good to have a conversation to talk about the word consent. It's a word, it's worth to talk about making a stand. No, and a no means a no. If you say no, darling, then no man on planet Earth has got the right to override your no. Your no is no. That's the end of story. If someone doesn't accept your no, that person is a bad person by the very meaning. If somebody's ignoring your opinion, then that person is not worthwhile being with or engaging with. And if you have a son, the same thing. We need to engage with our sons and tell them, this is how you treat a woman. There is a respectful way. You don't have to be an extreme gentleman. You don't have to go over the top. Nobody's saying that. There's a difference between being a boy and there's a difference between masculinity. There's nothing wrong with masculinity. That word has got such a bad taste in recent media. I don't have a problem with masculinity at all. I'm a masculine person, but my masculinity I can express by opening the door when I go to a restaurant, or when I open the car door for my wife, or buy a bunch of flour once a year, whatever. That's my way of expressing masculinity. That's being respectful for my wife. It's a sign of my masculinity. But toxic masculinity or masculinity extremism is wrong, and I think we need to teach our boys the difference between A and B. There's nothing wrong with being a man. I think I really believe it, and I refuse, despite the fact how passionate I am about women's safety, I refuse to give up my masculinity because I know it's a healthy masculinity. But there are individuals on YouTube, on social media, or in the digital world, the Tate brothers, whoever they are, Conor McGregor, whoever these guys are, whose masculinity is clearly, extremely extremist.
Yeah. The Tate brothers, and it's unreal how they have such a following.
Absolutely, but the story goes on forever, doesn't it? Look at Conor McGregor, or look at whatever this guy's called, Kenny West. And I haven't followed it, but again, My wife doesn't follow this kind of stuff neither, but she by coincidence came across that image like of Kanye West at this award ceremony with his wife or his partner, where she was wearing like basically a see-through dress.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I don't follow any of that. She said, "Oh, Robert, you need to see it." And I thought, I've got no interest. And she said, "No, it's actually relevant to what you do and it's relevant to your book." So I thought, okay, fair enough. So I looked at it and it literally shook me to the core because the facial expression
Mm-hmm.
of that woman at Kanye West at the award ceremony, it was just total coercive control. It was literally the very, very, it was incredible.
Say
Sad.
it all, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was total dominance. You can see Conor McGregor's court case, when he was holding his fiancée or his girlfriend, whoever she was, wrist when she was walking back to the car. You could see the tightness in his grip. That wasn't about, I hold my wife's hands, I hold her wrist sometimes, and we cross the street for safety reasons because I care. That's what I do. So if I see danger, I can protect my wife. I do that. But when you see Conor McGregor rubbing his girlfriend's wrist, you could see the tightness. You could see the toxic.
You could
tension
feel it nearly.
and
You could feel
you
it.
could feel it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It felt tangible. It felt like, oh, that was so
Exactly.
tight.
That wasn't
And then the
caring. That
eyes.
wasn't that wasn't caring or protected.
No.
There's nothing. That's what I mean. And that's what I'm saying about the early accommodation we have to the safety and security professionals or men in general. If I go take a walk, I can see if someone is in distress or not. It can be a woman, a man, or a child. It doesn't matter. My wife also quite fascinated with the things I see sometimes. But part of my security intelligence background would have made me the person who I am. But I can see, I can be in a restaurant with my wife, and I can see a couple having an argument 2 minutes before they actually know they're having an argument. I played actually games like this, and I promise you, in the next 10, 15 minutes, one of them is going to storm out. And guess what? Minutes later, one of them storms out. Literally, it happened so many times. It's fascinating. But we all have got this intuition, and we all, man or woman, can see she doesn't look happy. As you just said, you can see Conor McGregor's grip in her wrist. The question is, if we would be in public, how many men would say something? How many men would question something? Or how many men would actually discuss that? You know what I mean? And that is, I think, changing. I hope that more men, clearly there's a difference between invading people's privacy for no reason, just being nosy is different. But if I feel I see something that represents a person being in some level of distress, then I'd rather be rude and ask the question and engage, be told off, than ignoring it and going home and worrying what will happen, what has happened to that lady today. That's the difference.
Brilliant. Robert, thank you so much for writing the book, Never a Victim, and for the work that you put in to keeping women safe until we have huge change across the world. And it was such a pleasure to speak to you today. And I hope our listeners get as much from it as I did. And of course, our conversations before today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you giving me the platform, and I hope I've answered some of your questions to your satisfaction.
It's been brilliant because I was of the mindset, it's up to us to fix it. But I get that it's keeping us safe until society changes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. And thank you for that, Robert.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Femcast. We hope it has helped shed light on the critical issues affecting us today. If you or someone you know has experienced anything discussed in this episode, please log on to our website, thefemcast.com, for support services and help. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review our podcast to help us continue bringing these important conversations to the forefront. Join us next time for more inspiring stories and empowering discussions. Stay strong, stay informed, and stay connected. This is the Femcast.